The galaxy had seen countless warriors, Jedi Knights who wielded plasma blades with supernatural grace, Mandalorian super commandos in Beskar armor, Sith Lords who commanded the darkness itself. But it had never seen anything quite like the man who came screaming through a dimensional tear above Lothal, riding a burning ship that looked like it had been cobbled together from a Vegas casino and a military surplus store. Duke Nukem didn't believe in gentle landings. His ship, what was left of it, carved a blazing trench through Lothal's grasslands before slamming into the outskirts of Capital City with enough force to shatter windows 3 blocks away. The craft was barely recognizable, fins twisted at impossible angles, hull scorched black from whatever cosmic blender had chewed it up and spit it out here. Smoke poured from the wreckage as the cockpit hatch exploded outward, propelled by a well-placed kick. Duke emerged from the smoke like a vision from another universe entirely. 6 feet of pure ego wrapped in a red tank top and blue jeans, blonde flat top catching the light of Lothal's sun, wraparound shades reflecting the burning wreckage behind him. He rolled his shoulders, cracked his neck, and surveyed the alien skyline with the casual confidence of a man who'd blown up too many alien invasions to be impressed by new real estate. Looks like I took a wrong turn at Albuquerque. He pulled the golden Desert Eagle from his hip holster, checked the magazine with practiced efficiency, and chambered around. Time to find out where the hell I am. The answer came 30 seconds later in the form of Imperial stormtroopers. 6 of them rounded the corner of a prefab housing block, white armor gleaming, E-11 blaster rifles raised. Their helmet speakers crackled with typical Imperial efficiency. Unidentified being, you are in violation of Imperial landing protocols. Surrender immediately or... Duke's Devastator roared to life. The triple-barreled rocket launcher was his pride and joy, a weapon so absurdly overpowered that it turned most firefights into brief, spectacular fireworks displays. The rockets streaked across the 50 meters, separating them from the stormtroopers in a heartbeat, and the subsequent explosion painted the prefab wall with scorch marks and sent white armor clattering across the pavement. Ooh, that's gonna leave a mark. Duke admired his handiwork, then spotted more white-armored figures rushing from nearby streets. And here comes the cleanup crew. Let's dance. The Empire had conquered thousands of worlds through overwhelming firepower and numerical superiority. They were experts at pacifying populations, crushing rebellions, and establishing order through fear. They had protocols for every conceivable threat. They had no protocol for Duke Nukem. This wasn't a man, this was a one-person apocalypse with a smirk and a catchphrase. Duke moved through Capital City's streets like a force of nature, his boots thundering against Duracrete as blaster bolts sizzled past his head. He dove behind a produce cart, scattering some kind of purple fruit, yanked a pipe bomb from his tactical webbing, armed it with a thumb press, and lobbed it over his shoulder without looking. The explosion flipped an Imperial speeder bike end over end. "Come get some," Duke roared, rising from cover with his Ripper chain gun spooling up. The weapon, a rotating assembly of crystal-tipped rounds, made a sound like a buzzsaw having a nightmare as it chewed through stormtrooper armor, Durasteel barriers, and an unfortunate Imperial propaganda holoscreen that had been displaying Grand Moff Tarkin's face. Civilian Lothals scattered like startled nerfs, diving into doorways and alleys. Some watched from windows, eyes wide with disbelief. The Empire had occupied their world for years. They'd seen rebel cells crushed, seen families torn apart, seen the power of the Imperial military machine. They'd never seen one man treat stormtroopers like target practice at a shooting gallery. Duke reloaded behind an overturned cargo hauler, his eyes scanning the street through a gap in the metal. More troops were coming. He could hear the synchronized march of boots, the barked orders through helmet comms. Good. He hadn't survived the alien invasion of Los Angeles by playing defense. He slapped a fresh magazine into his shotgun, a weapon that made music at close range, and grinned that cocksure grin that had been his trademark across a dozen alien wars. "Guess I'm the welcome wagon now," he muttered, activating his jetpack. The compact propulsion system roared to life, lifting him 15 feet straight up as stormtroopers rounded the corner below. They had exactly half a second to process the impossible sight of a man hovering above them before Duke opened fire. The shotgun bellowed. Stormtroopers fell. Somewhere in the Imperial Garrison Command Center, alarms started screaming. Somewhere in the maze of capital cities' occupied zones, ordinary people started whispering about the impossible warrior who'd fallen from the sky. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, the Empire's vast war machine began turning its attention toward Lothal. Duke landed on a rooftop, shotgun smoking, and looked out at the city sprawling before him. Strange architecture, strange sky, strange everything. But the guys in white armor? They were the same fascist bastards he'd been fighting his whole career, just with different uniforms. He cracked his knuckles and started walking toward the largest Imperial tower on the skyline. If you want to see more characters enter different universes, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character and the universe you'd want to see them in down in the comments below. May the Force be with you. Time to introduce himself properly. Captain Ven Tarek had served the Empire for 12 years. He'd pacified insurgencies on 4 worlds, commanded 3 garrison battalions, and earned 2 commendations for efficient civilian management. He was a competent officer who followed protocols, maintained order, and reported irregularities through proper channels. He was utterly unprepared for Duke Nukem. "Report," Tarek barked, hands clasped behind his back as he studied the holographic display in the Garrison Command Center. The tactical map showed capital city's grid, with red indicators blooming like infection across 6 city blocks. Each indicator represented a squad of stormtroopers that had stopped responding. "Sir, we've lost contact with squads 7, 12, 19, and 23. The communications officer reported, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Last transmissions indicate a single hostile combatant armed with unknown weapons. Preliminary scans suggest—" She paused, checking her readout twice. "Suggest projectile-based kinetic weapons, sir." "Projectile weapons?" Tarek frowned. Kinetic slug throwers were antiquated, inefficient compared to blaster technology. Only backwater worlds and desperate criminals still used them. "Are we dealing with some kind of primitive insurgent?" "Negative, sir. Witnesses report the hostile is using advanced technology, including a personal flight system and explosive devices of unknown origin. He's moving through our positions like—" She trailed off. "Like what, Lieutenant?" "Like they're not there, sir." Tarek pulled up the surveillance footage from the city's security cameras. What he saw made his jaw tighten. The hostile was humanoid, roughly 2 meters tall, muscular build, wearing civilian clothing that offered 0 tactical protection. No armor, no helmet. Just a red shirt and pants that looked absurdly out of place in a combat zone, and he was destroying Imperial troops with casual, almost contemptuous ease. The footage showed the hostile, designated Target Alpha, using a tripod-mounted weapon that fired explosive rounds in a spread pattern. 3 stormtroopers disintegrated in the blast. Target Alpha then produced a handheld device that fired a crimson beam, freezing 2 more troopers solid before he casually shattered them with a follow-up shot from what appeared to be a chemical projectile weapon. "What in the Emperor's name am I looking at?" Tarek breathed. The tactical officer cleared his throat. "Sir, recommend we deploy ATST walkers and establish a perimeter. We can box him in, use our numerical advantage." "He's already broken through 3 of our perimeters," Tarek snapped. He zoomed in on Target Alpha's face. The man was smiling, actually smiling as he dodged blaster fire and returned shots that punched through stormtrooper armor like it was plasteel sheeting. This isn't a random insurgent. This is someone who knows exactly what he's doing. Sir, incoming transmission from Target Alpha. Tarek blinked. He's contacting us? Negative, sir. He's broadcasting on all Imperial frequencies. The main holo display flickered, and suddenly Duke Nukem's face filled the screen. He was standing on the roof of a commandeered Imperial cargo hauler, city skyline behind him, holding what looked like a cigar, where he'd gotten it. Nobody knew. "Attention, Imperial dirtbags," Duke's voice boomed through the command center speakers. "Name's Duke Nukem. I'm new in town, and I got to say, your hospitality sucks. Shot at me the moment I crashed. Didn't even offer directions. Real rude." Tarek felt his face flush red. The sheer audacity. "So here's what's gonna happen," Duke continued, pointing at the camera with his cigar. "You tin can wearing fascists are gonna pack up your toys and get off this planet. You got 2 hours. Anyone still here after that?" He grinned, and there was nothing friendly in it. "Well, I hope your medical plan covers getting your ass kicked." The transmission cut out. The command center stood in shocked silence. "Get me a full battalion," Tarek said quietly, his voice deadly calm. "Deploy all available ATSTs. I want heavy weapons teams on every approach vector to this position, and contact the sector command. Tell them we may need orbital support." "Sir, for one hostile?" "Lieutenant, I've watched that man destroy 47 stormtroopers in under 10 minutes. Tarek pulled up the tactical display, highlighting Duke's last known position. "He's either insane, suicidal, or he knows something we don't. I'm not taking chances. We end this now with overwhelming force." What Captain Tarek didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that Duke Nukem had built a career on facing overwhelming force. The alien invasion of Earth had thrown entire fleets at him. He'd walked through hordes of pig cops, battle tanks, and assault commanders with nothing but weapons, wit, and absolute confidence in his own superiority. The Empire was about to learn what Los Angeles had learned years ago. Duke Nukem didn't know how to lose. 20 minutes later, Duke stood in the shadow of an Imperial communications tower, watching stormtroopers assemble in parade ground formations below. AT-ST walkers clanked into position, their chin-mounted blasters tracking for targets. Officers barked orders through comlinks, coordinating the net that was meant to trap him. "Cute," Duke muttered. He pulled his shrink ray from his belt, a ridiculous weapon that violated half the laws of physics but worked beautifully, and took aim at the lead AT-ST. The ray hit the walker's cockpit. There was a brief shimmer, and then the massive war machine compressed down to the size of a toy. Duke hopped down from his vantage point, walked over to the miniaturized walker, and casually stepped on it. The metal crunched like aluminum foil under his boot. "Oops." He looked at the shocked stormtroopers surrounding him. "My bad." Then he activated his jetpack and opened fire. Capital City had been under Imperial occupation for 3 years. The people of Lothal had learned to live with stormtrooper patrols, random inspections, and the constant presence of military authority. They'd learned to keep their heads down, avoid trouble, and accept that the Empire's order was simply how things were now. Duke Nukem was about to give them a masterclass in civil disobedience. The battle that erupted in Sector 7 would be talked about 4 generations. Duke moved through the Imperial positions like a wrecking ball wrapped in arrogance, his weapons turning military formations into chaotic routes. The Empire had numbers, hundreds of stormtroopers, dozens of walkers, air support in the form of TIE fighters screaming overhead. Duke had experience, attitude, and absolutely no concern for playing fair. He used the city itself as his weapon. When stormtroopers tried to pin him in a narrow street, he fired an expander rocket into a building support column. The entire structure collapsed, burying 2 squads under Duracrete rubble. When an AT-ST tried to corner him in a market square, he used his freeze ray to turn its legs into brittle ice, then blew them apart with his shotgun. The walker toppled like a felled tree, crushing an Imperial speeder bike patrol beneath it. "This is too easy," Duke shouted, reloading his Ripper chain gun while hovering 30 feet above the street. Below him, stormtroopers fired wildly, their E-11 blasters stitching the air with red bolts that missed by yards. "You boys need more training." He dropped 3 pipe bombs in sequence, the explosives clattering across the Duracrete before detonating in perfect rhythm. Boom, boom, boom. The synchronized explosions sent stormtroopers flying like white-armored ragdolls. But Duke wasn't just fighting, he was liberating. Every Imperial checkpoint he hit, he destroyed the command terminals and told the Lothals to run. Every garrison supply depot he raided, he left open for civilians to loot. Every propaganda holoscreen he passed, he shot out with almost gleeful satisfaction. He was leaving a trail of freed citizens and burning Imperial materiel across 6 city blocks. "You see that?" a Lothal dock worker whispered to his companion as they watched from a cantina window. Duke was standing on top of a burning AT-ST walker, arms spread wide, shouting something about alien bastards at the fleeing stormtroopers below. "He's destroying them. One man." "That's not a man," his companion breathed. "That's a revolution with legs." The whispers spread through Capital City like wildfire. The impossible warrior from another world, the one who laughed at stormtroopers and treated Imperial walkers like practice targets. Some called him insane, others called him hope. Duke would have called himself just a guy doing his job, and his job was kicking ass. Captain Tarek watched the chaos unfold from his command center, his face growing paler with each status report. He'd thrown everything at Target Alpha, everything except air support, which was tied up dealing with local rebel activity in the outer territories. Nothing worked. The hostiles simply adapted, using weapons that defied standard Imperial countermeasures. "Sir, he's taken out our entire eastern garrison," the tactical officer reported. "Casualties are extensive. We have 67 stormtroopers down, 9 walkers destroyed, and reports of civilian unrest breaking out in 4 sectors. They're emboldened by his attack." Tarek slammed his fist on the command console. "Get me sector command, now!" The holographic display shimmered, and the Imperial officer in a crisp uniform materialized, Commander Bast, the sector authority. His expression was ice cold. "Captain Tarek, explain why you've allowed a single insurgent to cripple an entire garrison." "Sir, this isn't a standard insurgent. His technology is beyond anything in our database. His tactics suggest military training at the highest level, and he's operating with complete disregard for his own safety. I recommend we designate him a priority threat and request inquisitorious involvement." Bast's eyes narrowed. "You want to call in an inquisitor because you can't handle one man?" "Commander, I've watched this hostile destroy 67 elite soldiers in 2 hours. He's using weapons we can't identify, moving with augmented capabilities, and deliberately provoking civilian unrest. This goes beyond standard garrison operations." There was a long pause, then Bast nodded slowly. "Very well. I'll contact the Inquisitorius. Hold your position and contain the hostile. Do not, I repeat, do not let him escape Capital City. If word spreads that a single warrior can humiliate the Empire, we'll have rebellions on every world in the sector." The transmission ended. Tarek turned to his officers. "Deploy all remaining forces, every trooper, every walker, every speeder bike. I want Target Alpha contained in Sector 7. Set up kill zones at every intersection, and someone get me a location." "Sir," the communications officer's voice cracked with urgency. "Target Alpha just seized the main Imperial garrison armory. He's broadcasting again." The main display flickered to life. Duke stood in the armory, surrounded by racks of E-11 blasters, thermal detonators, and Imperial munitions. He'd found an officer's cap somewhere and wore it backwards on his head, a mockery of Imperial authority. "Hey there, Captain Tarek," Duke said, somehow knowing exactly who was watching. "Nice weapons depot you got here, real secure. I especially like these thermal detonators. Primitive, but they pack a punch." He held one up to the camera. "I'm taking these. And these." He gestured at crates of blaster packs. "And definitely these." He pointed at a rack of E-11 rifles. "Consider it a gift tax for your hostile takeover of this planet." "You can't," Tarek started, then realized he was shouting at a recording. Duke's grin widened. "Oh, and one more thing. You got exactly 1 hour to leave. Ours already started. Better get moving." The transmission cut out. 5 seconds later, the armory exploded in a fireball visible from orbit. The Inquisitor arrived on Lothal like a shadow given form. He descended from a sleek Imperial shuttle, his dark robes flowing behind him as he strode across the garrison landing platform. Stormtroopers snapped to attention, officers straightened their uniforms. Even Captain Tarek, who'd commanded men through brutal battles, felt a chill run down his spine. The Inquisitor's species was difficult to identify, humanoid, but with ashen-gray skin and yellow eyes that seemed to glow with barely contained malice. He wore the standard Inquisitorius armor, black and gray plates designed for mobility, with the distinctive red insignia of his order emblazoned on his chest. At his belt hung the weapon that made him truly dangerous, a double-bladed lightsaber. "I am the 7th brother," the Inquisitor announced, his voice smooth as poisoned honey. "You have failed to contain a single insurgent, Captain. I am here to rectify your incompetence." Tarek bristled but held his tongue. Arguing with the Inquisitorius was a quick path to a short career, or a shorter life. "Sir, Target Alpha is unlike any hostile we've encountered. His weapons are irrelevant." The 7th brother waved a dismissive hand. "Technology means nothing against the Force. Show me his last known position." The tactical hologram displayed Duke's trail of destruction across Capital City. The Inquisitor studied it with cold calculation, his eyes tracing the pattern of attacks. "He's moving with purpose, not random chaos. Calculated strikes against command infrastructure. This one has tactical training. We believe he may be an advanced combat unit from an unknown system," Tarek offered. "No." The 7th brother's gaze grew distant, sensing something. "This one is different. There's no Force presence, not Jedi, not Sith, not even latent sensitivity. He's a void in the Force, yet he moves with absolute confidence. Curious." "Sir, if he's not Force-sensitive, then surely conventional weapons." "Captain, I sense your inadequacy is matched only by your stupidity. This warrior has destroyed your garrison because you rely solely on conventional thinking." The Inquisitor turned his yellow gaze on Tarek. "I will demonstrate how the Inquisitorius handles such problems. Where is he now?" "Last sighting was in the old market district, near the..." An explosion rattled the garrison windows. The 7th brother smiled. "How convenient. He comes to us." Duke Nukem had noticed the new player immediately. Years of fighting alien invasions had given him a sixth sense for when the real boss showed up, and the guy in the black robes radiating "I'm very important" vibes definitely qualified. He'd watched the shuttle land from a rooftop 3 blocks away, through the scope of a looted Imperial blaster rifle. "Space wizard," Duke muttered, recognizing the lightsaber immediately. He'd seen enough sci-fi holovids to know what those glowing swords meant. Of course they've got space wizards. He'd been planning to hit the garrison command center anyway. Now he had extra motivation. Duke loaded his RPG launcher with a fresh rocket, aimed carefully at the garrison's main entrance, and fired. The projectile streaked across the city in a perfect arc, trailing smoke. Impact. The garrison's durasteel doors buckled inward, and alarms screamed across the complex. "Knock, knock," Duke said, activating his jetpack and flying toward the chaos he'd just created. The seventh brother walked calmly through the smoke and debris, his lightsaber igniting with a snap, hiss that cut through the alarm's wail. The double-bladed weapon spun in his hands, red plasma humming with deadly energy. Stormtroopers scattered to defensive positions, officers shouted coordinates. Then Duke crashed through a second-story window, shotgun blazing. The Inquisitor's lightsaber moved in a blur, deflecting the shotgun pellets with precise economy. Superheated metal ricocheted across the room, melting small craters in the walls. The seventh brother's eyes locked onto Duke as the Earthling landed in a crouch, smoke rising from his weapon's barrel. "You must be the Jedi they're so afraid of," Duke said, standing to his full height. He studied the lightsaber with genuine interest. "Nice glow stick. I am no Jedi, fool. I am an Inquisitor of the Empire, and you..." The seventh brother gestured, and the Force erupted outward. An invisible hand seized Duke and hurled him across the room. Duke hit a wall hard enough to crack the Duracrete, but he rolled with the impact and came up, firing. His Ripper chain gun spooled up, filling the air with crystal-tipped rounds that screamed toward the Inquisitor. The lightsaber spun in a defensive wheel, deflecting the barrage. But Duke had fought enough bosses to know you didn't just attack head-on. He triggered a pipe bomb, rolling it across the floor. The seventh brother sensed the explosive, used the Force to push it aside, exactly as Duke wanted. The bomb detonated near a support column, bringing down a section of ceiling between them. Dust and debris filled the air. "Cheap tricks," the Inquisitor hissed, but Duke heard the surprise in his voice. This warrior wasn't Force-sensitive, couldn't sense attacks before they came, yet fought with the confidence of someone who'd faced impossible odds and won. Duke used the cover to reload and reassess. The guy could throw him around without touching him. That was new. And the lightsaber deflected bullets, which was seriously annoying. But nothing he couldn't handle. He'd fought worse in Los Angeles. "Hey, space wizard," Duke shouted through the smoke. "You ever fight someone who doesn't give a damn about your magic act?" The seventh brother's response was immediate. The Force lashed out, clearing the smoke in an instant, and the Inquisitor leapt 15 feet straight up, lightsaber spinning toward Duke's position. Duke's jetpack roared, lifting him at the last second. The lightsaber carved through the spot he'd occupied a heartbeat before. Duke twisted in midair, aimed his freeze ray, and fired. The crimson beam caught the Inquisitor in midair. Ice crystals formed across his robes, slowing his movement for just a second, long enough for Duke to fire his expander rocket. The projectile hit the frozen Inquisitor square in the chest. There was a bright flash, and the seventh brother's body began expanding rapidly, his robes tearing, his weapon falling from numbed hands. Then the Force erupted. The Inquisitor shattered the expander effect through sheer willpower, the dark side of the Force burning through the alien technology. He landed in a crouch, breathing hard, his yellow eyes blazing with fury. "Impressive," Duke admitted, landing on a nearby cargo crate. "You're tougher than you look. You dare!" The seventh brother's rage was palpable, darkening the room. He raised his hand and Duke felt that invisible grip again, but this time it was crushing, constricting around his chest like a vice. Duke's finger found the trigger of his Devastator. At point-blank range, he fired. 3 rockets streaked toward the Inquisitor. The Force user was forced to release Duke and dive aside, his lightsaber cutting 2 rockets from the air. The third impacted the wall behind him, and the explosion threw both combatants across the room. When the smoke cleared, Duke was already on his feet, bruised but grinning. The 7th brother rose more slowly, his robes scorched, his lightsaber flickering. "This isn't over," the Inquisitor growled. "Yeah, it is," Duke said, pointing behind him. The 7th brother turned to see structural supports cracked from the explosions, ceilings sagging dangerously. Duke had turned their entire battleground into a death trap. "See you around, space wizard." Duke fired his jetpack and burst through the weakened wall, escaping into the city sky as the garrison building collapsed behind him. The 7th brother barely escaped, using the Force to shield himself from falling debris. Captain Tarek watched from a safe distance as half his command center turned to rubble. His career was over. The insurgent had humiliated an Inquisitor. Civilian unrest was spreading across Capital City like wildfire, and somewhere in the maze of streets and alleys, Duke Nukem was reloading, grinning, and looking for his next target. The Empire had just learned a hard lesson. Some warriors don't care about your reputation. The rebel cell on Lothal had been watching Duke Nukem's rampage with a mixture of awe and concern. Hera Syndulla stood in the Ghost's common room, arms crossed, studying the holographic footage of Duke's latest attack. The Twi'lek pilot had seen plenty of brave fighters in her years with the rebellion. Jedi survivors, Clone War veterans, idealistic young recruits willing to die for freedom. But she'd never seen anyone fight like this Earthling. He took on an Inquisitor, Kanan Jarrus said, his own encounter with the 7th brother still fresh in his memory. The Jedi survivor watched Duke dodge a Force push and respond with a rocket launcher. And walked away. That's not supposed to be possible. "He's reckless," Sabine Wren countered, though her tone held grudging respect. The young Mandalorian studied Duke's tactics with an artist's eye. No armor, minimal cover discipline, and he's using weapons I've never seen before. But his explosive placement is genius. He's also drawing every Imperial in the sector to Lothal, Hera pointed out, which could be good for us, or catastrophic if they decide to make an example of the entire planet. Ezra Bridger, the youngest of their crew, leaned forward eagerly. "So let's recruit him. Anyone who can blow up that many stormtroopers has to be on our side, right?" "Maybe," Kanan said carefully. "Or maybe he's just chaos looking for a target. We need to find out what he wants." What Duke wanted at that precise moment was ammunition. He'd burned through most of his Earth ordnance, turning Capital City into an Imperial graveyard. The pipe bombs were gone. The Devastator was down to 3 rockets, and his freeze ray was running on fumes. He'd looted plenty of Imperial weapons. Thermal detonators were beautifully simple. E-11 blasters had decent stopping power, but they weren't his gear, weren't weapons he'd spent years mastering. He needed a resupply, which meant finding either a black market or making some friends. Duke sat on a rooftop overlooking Lothal's industrial sector, smoking one of the cigars he'd found in an Imperial officer's desk, watching the twin suns set. His body ached. Even with steroids and medkits, fighting an entire garrison took its toll. The Inquisitor had been no joke either. That invisible chokehold had nearly crushed his ribs before he'd broken free. "Space wizards," he muttered, shaking his head. "Why's it always got to be space wizards?" "Because the Force is real, and you just picked a fight with people who use it." Duke was on his feet in an instant, Desert Eagle drawn and aimed at the voice. A woman stood at the rooftop edge, green skin, head tails that marked her as alien, pilot's jacket over practical combat gear. She had her hands raised, showing she wasn't holding a weapon, but her stance suggested she knew how to use one. "Easy," she said calmly. I'm not Imperial. Name's Hera Syndulla. I lead a rebel cell operating in this sector. Rebels, huh? Duke didn't lower his weapon. Let me guess, you're here to recruit the guy blowing up your oppressors. Actually, I'm here to figure out if you're an asset or a liability. Hera gestured at the city below, where fires still burned from Duke's assault. You've done more damage to the Imperial presence in one day than we've managed in months. That's impressive. It's also brought enough heat to get this entire planet glassed from orbit. They won't glass the planet, Duke said, finally lowering his pistol. Bad for business. Dictators need planets to exploit, not burn. You sound like you've dealt with dictators before. Yeah, well, alien invasions tend to have a conquer Earth vibe. Duke holstered his weapon and studied Hera. She was calm, professional, reminded him of the few military officers he'd actually respected back home. So what do you want? I'm not really a joiner. I noticed you've been operating alone since you crashed. Hera moved closer, careful not to make any threatening moves. But alone means no resupply, no intel, no backup when things go sideways. We can offer all of that. In exchange for what? Following orders, wearing a uniform, sitting through briefings. Duke snorted. I work better solo. In exchange for coordination, Hera corrected. You hit Imperial targets, we hit Imperial targets. We share intelligence on garrison positions, supply convoys, officer movements. You keep your independence, we keep our strategic advantage. Everyone wins. Duke considered this. He'd never been good at playing nice with others. Too many egos, too many people telling him what he could and couldn't do. But he also wasn't stupid. The Empire was bigger than anything he'd faced on Earth, and even he had limits. What kind of intel we talking about? For starters, the Empire's calling in reinforcements. 3 Star Destroyers, 2 full legions of stormtroopers, and a priority directive from someone called Grand Moff Tarkin. Hera pulled up a holographic data pad, showing Imperial communications traffic. They've designated you a Class 1 threat. That's the same classification they use for Jedi survivors. Duke whistled. I'm flattered. You should be terrified. Tarkin doesn't make empty threats. If he's coming to Lothal personally, it means he's planning something that will make your fight with the 7th brother look like a warm-up. So you want me to run? I want you to be smart. Hera's expression was serious. The rebellion needs fighters like you, but we need you alive, not martyred in some blaze of glory that accomplishes nothing except giving the Empire propaganda footage. Duke was quiet for a long moment, watching the city lights flicker on across Capital City. Back on Earth, he'd always been the lone wolf, the guy who showed up, kicked ass, saved the day, and moved on to the next alien invasion. But Earth had been his home turf. He knew the territory, knew the weapons, knew the rules. This galaxy, this was different. Tell you what, Duke said finally. I'll take your intel, share some target locations, maybe coordinate on timing, but I'm not joining your rebellion, not wearing your colors, and definitely not taking orders. I do things my way. Fair enough. Hera extended her hand. Welcome to the informal alliance between Duke Nukem and the Spectres. Duke shook it, his grip firm. Spectres? That what you call yourselves? Better than that ragtag group of misfits, a new voice called out. A teenage kid with dark hair climbed onto the rooftop. The Force-sensitive Hera had mentioned over comms. I'm Ezra. That thing you did with the freeze ray? That was awesome. Kids got good taste, Duke said approvingly. Behind Ezra came 2 more figures, a bearded man with the bearing of a warrior and a young woman with distinctive Mandalorian armor in an artistic color scheme. Kanan and Sabine, Duke's tactical mind catalogued, the Jedi and the demo expert. So this is the guy who made an Inquisitor look human, Kanan said, studying Duke with barely concealed curiosity. I'd say I'm impressed, but mostly I'm confused. How are you still alive? Good question, Duke admitted. That invisible chokehold was a real pain. Got any tips for fighting space wizards? Don't get caught, Kanan suggested wryly. Inquisitors are trained to hunt Force sensitives. They're not used to fighting people who can't sense their attacks. That probably saved you. That and superior firepower, Duke corrected. Sabine laughed, a sharp, genuine sound. I like him. He's either the bravest fighter I've ever met or the craziest. Why not both? Duke flashed his trademark grin. Hera pulled up her datapad again, displaying tactical information. We've got confirmed intel on an Imperial supply convoy arriving in 3 days. Heavy weapons, armor plating, power cells, everything you'd need to restock. Interested? Duke's eyes lit up. Now you're speaking my language. There's a catch, Kanan warned. The convoy will be heavily guarded. ATSTs, stormtrooper escorts, probably air support. Even with your unique approach, it's going to be a tough fight. Tough fights are my specialty. Duke cracked his knuckles. You bring the intel, I'll bring the explosions. Deal? Deal, Hera agreed. We hit the convoy together, split the supplies, and if things go south, we cover each other's extraction. For the first time since crashing on Lothal, Duke Nukem wasn't completely alone in hostile territory. He had allies. Temporary, conditional allies, but allies nonetheless. The rebellion had gained a warrior unlike any in their ranks. And the Empire was about to learn that their problems had just multiplied. The Imperial supply convoy rolled across Lothal's plains 3 days later, a serpent of military might stretching half a kilometer. 6 armored cargo haulers, each the size of a small building, flanked by 12 ATST walkers and 3 full squads of stormtroopers mounted on speeder bikes. Above them, 2 TIE fighters provided air cover, their twin-ion engines screaming across the morning sky. It was the kind of force that made sensible rebels reconsider their life choices. Duke Nukem studied the convoy through macro binoculars from a ridge 2 clicks out, lying prone in the tall grass. Beside him, Sabine Wren was setting up her sniper position, while Kanan coordinated with Hera over comms. The plan was textbook rebel tactics: hit fast, hit hard, and disappear before the Empire could bring its full weight to bear. Duke had other ideas. So we take out the walkers first, right? Ezra asked eagerly, crouched nearby with his energy slingshot ready. Create chaos, then hit the cargo haulers. Actually, Duke said, lowering the binoculars, I'm thinking we just walk up and ask nicely. Everyone stared at him. You're joking, Sabine said flatly. Nope. Duke stood, brushing grass off his tank top. Those cargo haulers are packed with stuff I need. I'd rather not blow them up if I can avoid it. Duke, Kanan said carefully, using the tone reserved for dealing with the dangerously insane. There are 60 stormtroopers down there, plus walkers, plus air support. Walking up is suicide. Only if you're boring about it. Duke pulled out his Holoduke projector, a device that created a perfect holographic duplicate of himself. Watch and learn, Jedi. Before anyone could stop him, Duke activated his jetpack and flew straight toward the convoy. He's going to get himself killed, Kanan muttered. Yeah, Sabine said, already adjusting her scope to provide cover fire. But it's going to be spectacular. Duke landed 50 meters in front of the lead cargo hauler, arms crossed, standing in the middle of the road like he owned it. The convoy ground to a halt. Speeder bikes fanned out, weapons raised. ATST walkers locked their chin-mounted blasters on him. Stormtroopers poured from the haulers, establishing a perimeter that would have intimidated anyone with sense. "Gentlemen," Duke called out cheerfully. "Nice day for a drive. Mind if I take a look at your cargo?" The convoy commander, a lieutenant with a shiny officer's insignia, stepped forward, flanked by death troopers. His voice crackled through his helmet speaker. "You are the fugitive designated Target Alpha. Surrender immediately or be destroyed." "See, here's the thing," Duke said, casually pulling a cigar from his pocket and lighting it. "I've had a rough week, crashed my ship, got shot at by every tin can soldier in the sector, fought a space wizard who threw me through a wall. I'm tired, I'm annoyed, and I really need to restock my arsenal. So how about you just hand over the cargo and nobody has to get hurt?" The lieutenant's response was to signal his troops to open fire. Duke activated the Holoduke. The holographic duplicate ran left, drawing half the convoy's fire, while the real Duke dove right and triggered his jetpack. He soared over the stormtrooper line, pulled 3 thermal detonators from his belt, looted Imperial gear, ironically, and dropped them with perfect precision. The explosions ripped through the speeder bike formation, sending bikes and riders tumbling across the plains. "That's my cue," Sabine muttered, squeezing her trigger. Her customized blaster rifle spoke once, twice, 3 times. 3 ATST cockpit viewports shattered, the walkers stumbling as their pilots jerked away from broken transparasteel. Kanan and Ezra moved in from the flanks, lightsabers igniting. The blue and green blades deflected blaster fire as they wove through the chaos, cutting down surprised stormtroopers. Duke landed on top of a cargo hauler, his Ripper chain gun spooling up. "All right, you Imperial jackasses, time to dance." The chain gun roared. Crystal-tipped rounds chewed through stormtrooper armor, durasteel plating, and an unfortunate ATST that tried to target him. Duke moved like a force of nature, switching between weapons with practiced ease. Shotgun for close quarters, RPG for the walkers, freeze ray for clusters of troops. The rebels fought with coordinated precision, using Duke's chaos as cover to systematically dismantle the convoy's defenses. Kanan's lightsaber carved through walker legs. Sabine's explosives turned cargo haulers into cover positions. Ezra used the Force to trip stormtroopers and redirect blaster bolts. It was beautiful violence, a symphony of destruction conducted by warriors who knew their craft. The convoy commander realized too late that he was outmatched. He triggered his emergency beacon, calling for air support, orbital bombardment, anything, but the TIE fighters above were already breaking off. Chased by the Ghost's accurate turret fire as Hera swept in from above. "Target their command hauler," Hera's voice crackled over comms. "Third vehicle from the front." Duke grinned, loading his last Devastator rocket. "With pleasure." The rocket streaked across the battlefield and punched through the command hauler's armored hull. The explosion was spectacular. Secondary detonations from stored munitions, fire blooming across the plains, smoke rising in a pillar visible for kilometers. What was left of the convoy broke. Stormtroopers scattered, walkers retreated, and the surviving vehicles tried to flee. The rebels let them go. They'd gotten what they came for. 30 minutes later, Duke stood amid the wreckage, surveying the captured cargo with the satisfaction of a man who just hit the jackpot. Crates of power cells, enough to recharge his equipment for months. Blaster rifles and thermal detonators, perfect for resupply. Heavy weapons that would make the rebels' next operations significantly easier. "Not bad," Sabine admitted, cracking open a crate of Mandalorian-made munitions with obvious delight. "For an improvised assault." "I've done this before," Duke said, loading power cells into his freeze ray. "Different galaxy, same strategy. Find the supply line, hit it hard, take what you need." Kanan approached, his lightsaber deactivated. That was reckless, even by our standards, but effective. Reckless is my middle name, Duke lied. Well, actually it's Nukem, but you get the idea. Hera landed the Ghost nearby, the ship's ramp lowering. We need to move. That emergency beacon will bring more Imperials within the hour. Load what we can carry and get out. They worked quickly, Rebels and Duke loading crates into the Ghost's cargo hold. It was strange, Duke thought, working alongside these people. He'd always been a solo operator. Show up, blow stuff up, move on. But watching these rebels coordinate, cover each other, fight for something bigger than themselves, it reminded him why he'd started fighting alien invasions in the first place. Because some things were worth protecting. Some freedoms were worth dying for. "Duke," Ezra called out, waving from inside the Ghost. "You coming or staying?" Duke looked at the destroyed convoy, then at the horizon where Imperial reinforcements would soon appear. He could stay, fight until they overwhelmed him, go out in a blaze of glory. That was the old Duke, the one who thought he could take on the universe alone. Or he could be smart, learn, adapt. "Coming," he called back, grabbing his last crate of supplies. As the Ghost lifted off, Duke stood at the cargo bay door, watching Lothal's planes shrink below. The Empire was coming. He could feel it. More troops, more walkers, more inquisitors. And somewhere in the cold vacuum between stars, a man named Tarkin was plotting his response. But for the first time since crashing in this galaxy, Duke Nukem had allies, had resources, had a fighting chance. The Empire thought they were hunting one man. They were about to learn they were at war with a legend. Grand Moff Wilhuff. Tarkin stood aboard the Imperial Star Destroyer Executrix, his hands clasped behind his back as he studied the holographic display of Lothal. The tactical map showed Imperial positions throughout the sector, each one marked with status indicators. Too many of them were red, damaged, destroyed, or compromised, all because of one man. "Explain to me," Tarkin said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority, "how a single unidentified combatant has crippled 3 Imperial garrisons, humiliated an Inquisitor, and destroyed a priority supply convoy in less than 1 standard week." Captain Tarek, summoned from Lothal to report personally, stood at rigid attention. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the Star Destroyer's controlled temperature. "Sir, Target Alpha possesses military technology beyond anything in our databases. His weapons suggest an advanced civilization, possibly extragalactic origin. He operates with complete tactical competence and shows no fear of Imperial authority." "No fear," Tarkin repeated, as if tasting the words. "How refreshing. The galaxy has grown too comfortable with our power. It seems this Duke Nukem requires a more direct demonstration of Imperial might." Admiral Cassius Constantine, hovering nearby like a bureaucrat seeking favor, cleared his throat. "Grand Moff, if I may suggest orbital bombardment of his last known positions, we can turn Capital City into an example." "No," Tarkin's voice was ice. "Bombardment is the tool of those who lack subtlety, Admiral. It would turn Target Alpha into a martyr and fuel rebel recruitment across the sector. We need something more precise." Tarkin pulled up Duke's profile, what little intelligence they'd gathered. Images of the Earthling fighting stormtroopers, destroying walkers, even the grainy footage of his confrontation with the 7th brother. The man fought like someone born in war, raised in combat. His weapons were crude but effective, his tactics brutally straightforward, and his confidence absolute. "He allies with the rebellion," Tarkin observed, noting the recent convoy raid, "or at least coordinates with them. That makes him a strategic asset worth denying. Captain, I'm reassigning you. You will coordinate with Inquisitor efforts to locate Target Alpha's base of operations. When you find it, you will not engage. You will report directly to me. Yes, sir. But Grand Moff, the Inquisitorius, has requested additional support. The seventh brother recommends deploying. I will decide what resources to deploy, Tarkin interrupted. The seventh brother had his chance and failed. This requires a more permanent solution. Tarek felt his blood run cold. There was only one person Tarkin would summon for a permanent solution to a force-insensitive combatant causing this level of disruption. You're sending Lord Vader, Tarek said, unable to keep the shock from his voice. I am informing Lord Vader of a priority threat to Imperial stability in his jurisdiction, Tarkin corrected. What he chooses to do with that information is, of course, his decision, but I suspect he will find Target Alpha's continued existence irritating. The holographic display shifted, showing the Executor, Darth Vader's personal superstar destroyer, en route to the Lothal sector. Its arrival was scheduled for 3 standard days. Duke Nukem had humiliated stormtroopers, destroyed Inquisitor's pride, and carved his name into Imperial failure records across multiple worlds. He'd done what most rebels only dreamed of, made the Empire look vulnerable. Now he was about to face the consequence of that success. On Lothal, Duke was blissfully unaware of the storm gathering around him. He'd set up a temporary base in an abandoned mining facility outside Capital City, far enough from Imperial patrols to avoid immediate detection, close enough to hit targets when opportunities arose. The rebels had provided intel, maps, and even some technical support for adapting his Earth technology to Star Wars power sources. His freeze ray now ran on standard power cells. His jetpack used hyperspace-compatible fuel. Even his holoduke had been upgraded with stolen Imperial holographic projectors. You're getting comfortable, Kanan observed, watching Duke tinker with his Ripper chain gun. The Jedi had become something like a liaison between Duke and the rebels, someone who could speak Duke's language while understanding rebel strategy. Comfortable's a strong word, Duke said, not looking up from his work. I'm just adapting. That's what you do when you're dropped into an alien galaxy with no way home. You think about going home much? Duke was quiet for a moment, his hands stilling on the weapon. Yeah. Got a planet full of babes waiting for me to save them from the next alien invasion. But until I figure out how I got here, I'm stuck. Might as well make myself useful. By fighting the Empire. By fighting fascists, Duke corrected. Same thing I do back home, just with different uniforms and glow sticks instead of guns. Kanan smiled slightly. Lightsabers, not glow sticks. Potato, potato. Sabine burst into the workshop, her usual composure cracked by urgency. We've got a problem. Big problem. Hera just intercepted Imperial communications. They're deploying something called the Executor to Lothal. Duke looked up. That doesn't sound good. It's not, Kanan said, his face going pale. The Executor is Darth Vader's personal flagship. If he's coming here... Who's Darth Vader? The silence that followed was profound. You don't know who Darth Vader is, Sabine asked incredulously. Kid, I've been in your galaxy for like a week. I know stormtroopers, I know space wizards with attitude problems, and I know the Empire likes building really big ships. That's about it. Kanan exchanged looks with Sabine. Darth Vader is... He's the Empire's enforcer, a Sith Lord, the Emperor's right hand. He's killed more Jedi than any Inquisitor, crushed more rebellions than entire fleets. If he's coming to Lothal, it's because Tarkin decided you're too dangerous to leave alive. So he's the real boss, Duke said slowly. The guy behind the curtain. The guy who chokes admirals to death through hologram for failing him, Sabine corrected. The guy who boarded a rebel flagship alone and killed everyone aboard. The guy who... I get it, Duke interrupted. Big bad Sith Lord, lots of bodies, very scary. When's he arriving? 3 days, Sabine said. Maybe less if he pushes his fleet. Duke stood, checking his weapons with methodical precision. Devastator loaded, Ripper chain gun oiled and ready. Freeze ray fully charged, shrink ray calibrated. He had thermal detonators, trip mines, pipe bombs, everything he'd scavenged or adapted from Imperial supplies. So here's what we do, Duke said calmly. We use those 3 days to hit every Imperial target we can find, make them spread their forces thin looking for us. When this Vader guy shows up, we make sure he has to work for it. That's insane, Kanan said. Vader will just what? Kill me? Duke's grin was sharp as broken glass. Space wizard, I've been fighting aliens trying to kill me since I was old enough to hold a gun. Another psychopath with magic powers doesn't scare me, it just pisses me off. Sabine laughed, a slightly unhinged sound. You know what? I'm starting to understand why the Empire designated you a Class 1 threat. Class 1? Duke raised an eyebrow. That good? That's what they call Jedi survivors, Kanan explained. The most dangerous enemies of the Empire, threats to galactic order. People they'll hunt across star systems to eliminate. Duke's grin widened. Well then, guess I better live up to the reputation. Over the next 3 days, Duke Nukem became a ghost story whispered in Imperial barracks. He hit 6 different garrisons, destroyed 2 AT-AT walkers that had just been deployed to Lothal, and personally blew up an Imperial recruitment center while broadcasting a message on all frequencies. The Empire's days are numbered, and I'm really good at counting. Every attack was coordinated with rebel cells, turning isolated strikes into synchronized chaos. Imperial forces were stretched to breaking, responding to threats across multiple sectors simultaneously. Stormtroopers jumped at shadows, officers slept with one eye open, and in the cold darkness of space, the Executor dropped out of hyperspace above Lothal. Darth Vader had arrived. The Executor was a monument to Imperial power, a superstar destroyer, 8 kilometers of weapons, armor, and absolute authority. Its shadow fell across Lothal like the hand of death itself, blocking out the sun over Capital City. Smaller star destroyers flanked it, a fleet meant to crush entire systems. Duke watched it from his base through macro binoculars, whistling low. Okay. That's a big ship. That's Vader's mobile fortress, Hera said over comms, her voice tight with worry. The Ghost was hidden in a nearby canyon, ready to evacuate at a moment's notice. Duke, you need to seriously consider leaving Lothal. This isn't a fight you can win. Haven't lost yet, Duke countered, lowering the binoculars, but even his legendary confidence felt the weight of that massive ship overhead. He'd fought impossible odds before, but this was different. This was facing the Empire's ultimate weapon, piloted by their greatest warrior. On the Executor's bridge, Darth Vader stood at the viewport, his black armor gleaming under harsh lights, his respirator breathing steady mechanical breaths that echoed through the cavernous chamber. Officers moved around him like mice near a sleeping predator, terrified to draw his attention. My lord, Admiral Constantine reported, maintaining a careful distance. Ground forces report no contact with Target Alpha in the past 12 hours. He's gone to ground. Then we will draw him out. Vader's voice was deep, resonant, carrying absolute certainty. This warrior operates alone but allies with rebels. He has demonstrated protective instincts toward Lothal's civilian population. That is his weakness. Sir, are you suggesting? I am not suggesting, Admiral. I am commanding. Deploy ground forces to Capital City. Begin searching every building, every dwelling. Make it clear. If Target Alpha does not surrender within 1 hour, We will execute 10 citizens for every minute he delays." The bridge fell silent. Even for the Empire, this was brutal. "My lord, Grand Moff Tarkin's orders were—" Vader turned his masked face toward Constantine. The Admiral felt an invisible pressure around his throat, crushing slowly. "Do you presume to question my methods, Admiral?" No, my lord," Constantine gasped. The pressure released. "Then carry out my orders and prepare my shuttle. I will oversee this personally." 1 hour later, stormtroopers marched through capital city's streets, pulling citizens from homes, gathering them in the central plaza. AT-AT walkers stood at each corner, massive four-legged war machines that dwarfed even the AT-STs Duke had been destroying. Their cannons tracked across crowds of terrified Lothals. A holographic projection of Darth Vader appeared above the plaza, 3 stories tall, his mechanical breathing amplified across every speaker in the city. "I am Darth Vader, Supreme Commander of Imperial forces in this sector. The insurgent known as Duke Nukem has exactly 1 hour to surrender. For every minute after this deadline, 10 citizens will be executed. For every hour, we will level 1 city block. This is not a negotiation. This is a demonstration of what happens when the Empire is defied." The hologram vanished. In his base, Duke heard the entire broadcast, heard the civilian screams, heard the mechanical breathing that promised death. "Don't do it," Kanan said urgently, standing in the doorway. He'd rushed to the base the moment Vader's ultimatum aired. "This is a trap. He's using civilians to bait you out. If you go, he'll kill you and them." "If I don't go, he kills them anyway," Duke said flatly. He was loading every weapon he owned, strapping on ammunition belts, checking power cells. "I fought fascists before, Jedi. This is what they do. Hurt innocents to draw out anyone with a conscience. Well, guess what? I've got a conscience. And I've also got enough firepower to make Lord Vader regret his life choices." "Duke, listen to me." Kanan grabbed his shoulder. "Vader isn't like the Inquisitor. He's not even like other Sith. He's the most powerful Force user in the galaxy. He can crush starships with his mind, sense attacks before they happen, and his lightsaber skills are legendary. You can't beat him. Watch me. You'll die." Duke turned, and Kanan saw something in those eyes, something that transcended arrogance or bravado. It was the look of a man who'd fought impossible battles and won through sheer refusal to lose, who'd faced alien armadas, cybernetic nightmares, and apocalyptic threats without backing down. "Maybe," Duke admitted, "but I'll make sure that son of a bitch remembers my name." He activated his jetpack and flew toward Capital City. Kanan immediately calmed Hera. "He's going. Full suicide run." "Damn it." Hera's voice was resigned but not surprised. "We'll provide what support we can. Get Sabine and Ezra. If he's going to die fighting Vader, he won't die alone." Duke landed in Capital City's central plaza with all the subtlety of a meteor strike. His jetpack flared, scattering stormtroopers, and he dropped into a combat crouch with his Devastator leveled at the nearest AT-AT. "All right, Lord Vader," Duke's voice boomed across the plaza, amplified by the holographic speakers Vader had used. "You wanted Duke Nukem? Well, here I am. Let these people go and face me like a man, or whatever you are under that Halloween costume." The plaza erupted in chaos. Stormtroopers opened fire. AT-8 cannons tracked toward Duke's position. Civilians ran for cover. And from an Imperial shuttle landing nearby, Darth Vader descended. He walked down the ramp with terrible purpose, lightsaber igniting with a snap hiss that cut through the battle's noise. The blade burned crimson, Sith red, the color of hatred and power. His cape billowed behind him, his armor caught the light of explosions, and his mechanical breathing was the sound of approaching death. Duke fired his Devastator. 3 rockets streaked toward Vader. The Sith Lord raised one hand and the Force erupted. The rockets stopped in midair, suspended by invisible power, then reversed course and flew back toward Duke. Duke dove, the explosions cratering the Duracrete where he'd stood. He came up firing his Ripper chain gun, a stream of crystal-tipped rounds screaming toward Vader. The lightsaber moved in a blur, deflecting every single round. Vader didn't break stride, walking toward Duke with the inevitability of a star's collapse. "Your weapons are meaningless," Vader intoned. "You are meaningless." Another insect crushed beneath the Empire's heel. "Insect?" Duke grinned, even as sweat dripped down his face. "Let me show you what this insect can do." He triggered his freeze ray. The crimson beam struck Vader square in the chest, and ice crystals began forming across the Sith Lord's armor. Vader's advance slowed, his breathing grew labored. For one perfect moment, Duke thought he'd found the answer. Then the dark side exploded outward. The ice shattered in an instant, vaporized by pure Force energy. Vader raised his hand and Duke felt that crushing pressure. The same Force choke the Inquisitor had used, but magnified 1,000-fold. His feet left the ground. His ribs creaked. His vision started to dim. "Can't breathe." Duke's hand found a pipe bomb. With the last of his strength, he pulled the pin and dropped it. Vader sensed the explosive, released Duke to deflect it, and Duke hit the ground, gasping. He rolled, grabbed his shotgun, fired point blank at Vader's legs. The lightsaber cut the shells from the air. This wasn't a fight. This was target practice, and Duke was the target. But Duke Nukem hadn't survived by being the strongest or fastest. He'd survived by being the meanest, most stubborn bastard in whatever galaxy he found himself in. He activated his Holo-Duke, creating 3 duplicate images that scattered in different directions. Vader destroyed 2 with Force pushes, but Duke, the real Duke, used the distraction to plant trip mines across the plaza and activate his shrink ray. The beam hit Vader. The Sith Lord began to shrink, 6 feet, 4 feet, 2 feet. The Force roared again, and Vader shattered the shrink effect through sheer power. But he'd lost his intimidating height, standing only 4 feet tall, his armor comically oversized. "Ha!" Duke couldn't help it. He laughed. "You look ridiculous." Vader's fury was palpable. The dark side darkened the air around him, and with a gesture, every loose object in the plaza, debris, weapons, even a stormtrooper unfortunate enough to be nearby, lifted into the air and flew at Duke like shrapnel. Duke activated his jetpack, ascending rapidly, but something caught his leg. Looking down, he saw Vader floating, actually floating, using the Force to pursue him into the air. "You will die," Vader promised, lightsaber raised. Duke aimed his last Devastator rocket and fired at point-blank range. The explosion engulfed them both. The explosion painted Capital City's plaza in fire and smoke. Duke plummeted from the sky, his jetpack damaged, systems sparking. He hit the ground hard, rolled with the impact but felt ribs crack, tasted blood. His Devastator was empty, barrel warped from the close-range detonation. Through the smoke, Darth Vader descended. The Sith Lord's armor was scorched, one shoulder plate cracked, but he moved with the same terrible purpose. His lightsaber had never extinguished. His breathing remained steady, mechanical, inevitable. "Impressive," Vader admitted, his voice carrying across the burning plaza. "You have survived longer than most Jedi, but your weapons are exhausted, your allies scattered, and I am inevitable." Duke spat blood, rising on unsteady legs. His Ripper chain gun was gone, lost in the fall. His freeze ray's power cell had shattered. His shotgun had 2 shells left. Around him, the plaza was a war zone, craters from explosions, burning debris, unconscious stormtroopers caught in the crossfire, and civilians still huddled at the plaza's edges, watching their potential savior face certain death. "Yeah?" Duke's voice was ragged but defiant. "Well, I'm not done yet." He pulled every remaining thermal detonator from his belt, 6 of them, looted from Imperial supplies, armed them all simultaneously, and charged straight at Vader. The Sith Lord raised his hand, attempting a force push, but Duke had learned. He'd been studying Vader's patterns, the split-second tells before each force attack. He dove left just as the invisible wave passed, rolled, and hurled 3 detonators. Vader's lightsaber batted 2 aside. The third exploded close enough to stagger him. Duke didn't stop. He emptied his shotgun, both barrels, both shells, at Vader's damaged shoulder plate. One shot deflected, one penetrated, drawing a grunt of pain from behind the mask. First blood. Then Duke was on him. Thermal detonators clutched like grenades, close enough that Vader couldn't use the Force without killing them both. At this range, it was pure combat. Duke's earth-trained brawling against Vader's armored might. Duke swung. Vader blocked with his lightsaber hilt. Duke ducked the return strike, slammed a detonator against Vader's chest plate, armed it. Vader Force pushed him away with desperate strength. Duke flew 15 feet, hit a wall, but he was already rolling, already moving. The detonator on Vader's chest exploded. The Sith Lord's chest panel cracked, sparks flying from damaged life support systems. His breathing hitched, a mechanical wheeze of pain. For the first time, Darth Vader looked vulnerable. "Duke!" Sabine's voice rang out. The Ghost screamed overhead, Hera at the controls, and the cargo ramp was open. Sabine leaned out, her sniper rifle firing precision shots at stormtroopers trying to reinforce their lord. "We've got your exit," Hera shouted through external speakers. "Move!" But Duke saw the civilians, still trapped by Imperial forces, still at risk. Saw Vader recovering, his damaged armor systems rebooting, his rage building like a supernova. "Get them out," Duke pointed at the civilians. "I'll buy you time." "You'll die," Kanan's voice, urgent. "Then I'll die doing something that matters." Duke grabbed his last weapon, a single pipe bomb, and ran toward Vader. Not away. Toward. Vader raised both hands and the Force gathered like a storm. Debris lifted from across the plaza. Durasteel plates, weapons, chunks of broken AT-AT armor. An arsenal of telekinetic death, all aimed at Duke. "You are a fool," Vader declared, "and fools die." The debris launched. Duke activated his damaged jetpack. It sputtered, failed, then caught at the last second. He flew erratically, dodging most of the deadly projectiles, but a Durasteel beam caught his shoulder, spinning him. A weapon fragment grazed his temple. Blood poured down his face, but he reached Vader, planted the pipe bomb on the Sith Lord's damaged chest panel. "Hail to the king, baby," Duke whispered. The explosion was catastrophic at point-blank range. Modified Imperial explosives Duke had jury-rigged to burn hotter, longer. Vader's chest panel shattered completely. His life support systems sparked and failed. His respirator made sounds like a dying animal. Duke flew backward from the blast, landing in a heap near the Ghost's ramp. Sabine and Ezra dragged him aboard as Vader collapsed to one knee, his lightsaber flickering, his mechanical breathing now a labored, broken rasp. "Go!" Duke shouted at Hera. The Ghost's engines roared. The ship climbed, but Vader, impossibly through sheer dark side fury, extended his hand. The Force grabbed the Ghost, holding it like a giant invisible fist. Metal groaned. Systems warned of structural failure. On his knees, dying, Darth Vader was still strong enough to crush them. Then the rebel cells struck. Coordinated attacks across Capital City, every cell Hera had contacted, every fighter Duke's rampage had inspired. Explosions bloomed across Imperial positions. AT-AT walkers were toppled by magnetic mines. Stormtroopers found themselves under fire from rooftops, windows, alleys. The entire city erupted in rebellion. Vader's concentration broke for just a second. His force grip loosened. The ghost broke free and screamed toward the atmosphere, leaving Lothal behind. In the plaza, Vader rose slowly, his chest panels smoking, his breathing barely functional. Around him, his stormtroopers rallied, but the civilians were gone, evacuated by rebels in the chaos. The insurgent had escaped, but not unscathed. Vader's hand clenched into a fist. "Alert Grand Moff Tarkin," he commanded, his damaged voice even more mechanical. "Target Alpha has been engaged. He will not escape this sector alive. I will hunt him across every system until he burns." The Dark Lord limped toward his shuttle, and even in defeat, even wounded, he radiated the promise of terrible vengeance. Duke Nukem had fought Darth Vader and survived. But survival was all he'd managed. The galaxy's most feared warrior now knew his name, knew his capabilities, and would never stop hunting him. The war had just begun. The Ghost limped through hyperspace, systems damaged, crew exhausted, and one severely battered Earthling in the medbay. Duke lay on the medical bunk, backed-up patches covering burns and lacerations, ribs wrapped tight. Chopper, the cantankerous astromech droid, hovered nearby, administering treatment with the mechanical equivalent of grumbling. Every breath hurt, every movement was agony, but Duke was grinning. "You're insane," Sabine said from the doorway. She'd cleaned the soot from her armor, but still looked shell-shocked. "Completely, utterly insane. You fought Darth Vader. You actually damaged Darth Vader." "Damaged him pretty good, too," Duke managed through split lips. "Did you see his chest panel explode? That was beautiful." Hera entered, her expression torn between relief and exasperation. "Duke, you started a planet-wide rebellion. Capital City is in chaos. The Empire's lost control of 3 major sectors. And Vader..." She paused, still processing it. "Vader had to retreat for repairs. That's never happened. Never." "So we won?" Duke asked. "We survived," Kanan corrected, following Hera in. The Jedi looked at Duke with newfound respect, mixed with concern. "But now you're the most wanted man in the galaxy. The Empire will hunt you across every system. Tarkin won't stop. And Vader..." He trailed off. "Vader's gonna want a rematch," Duke finished. "Yeah, I figured. Guy seemed like the type to hold a grudge." "This isn't funny," Hera said seriously. "You can't fight the entire Empire alone. Not even you." Duke was quiet for a moment, staring at the medbay ceiling. His body ached. His weapons were destroyed or depleted. He was stranded in a galaxy far from home, with the Empire's full might turning toward him like a Star Destroyer's guns. And yet, back on Earth, Duke said slowly, aliens invaded, took over the planet, killed millions. Everyone said it was hopeless, that we should surrender, accept our new alien overlords. But you know what? Some of us didn't accept it. Some of us fought back, no matter how impossible it seemed. He sat up, wincing at the pain, and looked at each of them in turn. Your empire? They're just another alien invasion. Bigger ships, fancier weapons, space wizards instead of plasma rifles. But it's the same fight. Fascists trying to crush anyone who won't bow. And I don't bow. So what now? Ezra asked from the doorway, having been listening. You keep fighting until they kill you. I keep fighting until they stop, Duke corrected, or until I find a way home. Whichever comes first. Sabine pulled up a data pad showing intelligence reports flooding in from across the sector. You've become a symbol. Rebels on 6 different worlds are citing your attack on Vader as proof the Empire can be hurt. Recruitment's spiking. Even neutral systems are questioning Imperial authority. One man with enough firepower and stupid courage can change everything, Kanan mused. The Jedi used to believe that. Maybe there's truth to it after all. Hera activated the holographic display in the medbay, showing a galactic map. Red indicators marked Imperial strongholds, blue marked rebel cells, and now, spreading like wildfire, yellow indicators. Unaligned systems emboldened by Duke's rampage, questioning Imperial occupation. The rebellion's been fighting for years, Hera said. Small victories, costly defeats, always one step away from extinction. But you've done something we couldn't. You made the Empire look mortal, made people believe they could fight back. Yeah, well, Duke said, someone's got to show these fascists they're not invincible. Outside the Ghost's viewports, hyperspace streamed past in blue-white streaks. They were heading to a safe system, far from Imperial patrols, where rebel leadership wanted to meet the warrior who'd bloodied Darth Vader and lived to brag about it. But Duke knew this was just the beginning. Tarkin would mobilize fleets. Vader would recover and hunt, with singular purpose. Inquisitors would coordinate to bring him down. The Empire had unlimited resources, billions of soldiers, and the patience to wage war across decades. Duke had attitude, weapons that ran on jury-rigged power cells, and allies who were one bad day from getting wiped out. The smart play would be to find a quiet planet, lay low, wait for the heat to cool. Duke Nukem had never been smart. He'd been effective. So here's the plan, Duke announced, standing despite Chopper's indignant beeping protests. We rearm, regroup, hit every Imperial target we can find, make so much noise that they can't ignore us, that every oppressed world sees what's possible when you stop being afraid. That's not a plan, Sabine objected. That's a death wish. Call it what you want, Duke said, his trademark grin returning despite the pain. I'm gonna show this galaxy what happens when you mess with Duke Nukem. And if the Empire wants to stop me, he cracked his knuckles. They're welcome to try. Kanan exchanged looks with Hera. The Twi'lek pilot sighed, but there was a smile playing at her lips. You know what? Fine. We'll coordinate operations, share intelligence, keep you supplied. But Duke, try not to get yourself killed. The rebellion needs you alive. The galaxy needs him angry, Ezra corrected with a young warrior's enthusiasm. The Empire needs him gone, Sabine added pragmatically. Then I guess we'll see who gets what they need, Duke said. The Ghost dropped out of hyperspace above a lush green planet, one of the secret rebel rendezvous points. Below, ships gathered. Blockade runners, modified freighters, even a few stolen Imperial vessels. Rebel commanders from across the sector, all coming to see the legend for themselves. Duke stood at the viewport, watching the fleet assemble. Somewhere out there, Vader was being repaired. Tarkin was plotting revenge. The Empire was marshaling its forces for a reckoning, but spreading faster than Imperial orders were stories, whispered in cantinas, shared over encrypted comms, told around fires on occupied worlds. Stories of an outsider who'd crashed into their galaxy and refused to be conquered. Who'd faced the Dark Lord himself and walked away. Stories that gave hope to those who'd forgotten what hope looked like. Duke Nukem had come to the Star Wars galaxy by accident. He'd fought the Empire because that's what he did. Fought fascists, protected innocents, kicked ass. But now he had something more dangerous than weapons or tactics. He had a reputation. And across the galaxy, on worlds suffering under Imperial boots, People started asking a question that terrified every stormtrooper and officer who heard it. What if we fought back? The Battle of Lothal entered Rebel legend as the day the impossible became real. One man, an outsider from an unknown world, had challenged the Empire's might and survived. Duke Nukem's explosive arrival and his brutal confrontation with Darth Vader became a rallying cry across oppressed systems. The scorch marks he left in Capital City's plaza were still visible months later, a permanent reminder that even the Empire's greatest enforcer could bleed. But the war was far from over. Grand Moff Tarkin issued sector-wide bounties that made Duke the most wanted being in Imperial space. Vader, his armor repaired but his pride wounded, personally commanded the hunt. Inquisitors coordinated across multiple systems. The Empire's vast machine turned its full attention toward eradicating the insurgent who'd made them look vulnerable. Yet Duke Nukem remained elusive, striking Imperial convoys and garrisons with the rebels, then vanishing before overwhelming force could respond. Each attack inspired new resistance cells. Each victory proved that the Empire was not invincible. On occupied worlds, citizens began leaving explosive gifts for stormtroopers. Rebel recruitment doubled, then tripled. Duke had become more than a warrior. He'd become proof that one person with enough courage and firepower could change the galaxy's trajectory. The rebels offered him rank, command, medals. Duke declined them all. He wasn't interested in titles or formal alliances. He fought because fascists needed fighting, because innocent people deserved protection, and because, despite the pain, the danger, the overwhelming odds, it was what heroes did. Somewhere in the vastness of space, Duke Nukem continued his war against the Empire. His weapons adapted to galactic technology. His tactics evolved to counter Force users. His legend grew with each impossible survival, each audacious raid, each time he proved that the Force wasn't the only power worth fearing in the galaxy. The Empire hunted him. Vader promised vengeance. Tarkin planned elaborate traps. But Duke Nukem had survived alien invasions on Earth. He'd faced down cybernetic monsters, interdimensional horrors, and planetary threats. The Galactic Empire was just another group of alien bastards who needed to learn an important lesson. When you shoot at Duke Nukem, you better not miss, because Duke never did. May the Force be with you. More stories await.